Good morning. Sorry, I thought there was a video going to play. If you have your church Bibles, can you turn to page 940? That is where Philemon is. So if you don't have that one, it's towards the end of the Bible, just before Hebrews. So it's a sneaky little one because it's so small you can easily miss it, and you find yourself flipping to either side, and you're like, there it is there. You got to try and peel the pages apart. So thanks, Olivia. So you possibly, like me, you don't often read this one. This one sneaks through. I have read this once before preparing for this sermon, so I heard it years ago. I'll get to that later, but I just remember it really stuck with me, and I thought I'd bring it today. So I called the message "A Man Called Useful," and I'll explain why that is why we've called it. Imagine getting a friend sending you a letter. So you go to the mailbox or the PO box or however you do it, open it up and there's a letter. Well, hey, it's not a bill. Thank goodness. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like 90% of what you get in the mailbox is either junk mail or bills. So it's like occasionally you get a postcard, occasionally it's a letter. So, a bit like this one. To Philemon at Colossae, Australia Post. And we got Paul the Apostle, who's in Rome. So it's a good little letter. We're going to get into that in a second. So this book is called Philemon, but it's actually not, it's addressed to him, but it's not really about him. So we're going to explain that in a minute. This book is, as you've probably noticed by looking at it now, you could read it pretty quickly. I actually timed it. I read the whole thing in under 4 minutes. So it was like, it's a pretty speedy little book. And you could say to your friends, hey, I read an entire book of the Bible today, just putting it out there, you know. Wow, that's amazing. So this book was probably accompanying the book of the Colossians book. So the Colossians book was a public letter to the church of Colossae. But this one was attached to that letter, and it was a private letter to this man, Philemon. So it's kind of very different. So you've got the one to the whole church of that city, and then you got this one, which was just to one guy. But we get to read it today too, which is pretty special. So I'm going to be a little bit cheesy and rip open my letter. Wow, it's a letter from Paul. All right, so it says, hi Philemon. Yes, the food is really terrible here in Rome. And anyway, blah, blah, blah. Now, if you want to read with me from verse 8, I'll read it seriously now. That is why I'm boldly asking a favour of you. I could demand it in the name of Christ because it is the right thing for you to do. But because of our love, I prefer simply to ask you, consider this a request from me, Paul, an old man, and now also a prisoner for the sake of Christ Jesus. I appeal to you to show kindness to my child Onesimus. Okay. I don't know who Onesimus is, but we'll get to that. I became his father in the faith while here in prison. Onesimus hasn't been much use to you in the past. That's a bit rude, a bit harsh. But now he's very useful to both of us. Okay. I'm sending him back to you, and with him comes my own heart. I want to keep him here with me while I was in chains for preaching the good news, and he would have helped me on your behalf. But I didn't want to do anything without your consent. I wanted you to help because you were willing, not because you were forced. It seems you lost Onesimus for a little while so that you could have him back forever. He is no longer like a slave to you. He is more than a slave, for he is a beloved brother, especially to me. Now he will mean much more to you, both as a man and as a brother in the Lord. So if you consider me your partner, welcome him as you would welcome me. If he has wronged you in any way or owes you anything, charge it to me. From Paul. So this is a very personal letter, and so it's not like a lecture or anything. This is a letter, a private letter from one man to another man concerning a matter that's happened. So a couple of words jumped out at me when I first read this, and you probably noticed them as well, is one was the word useless and one was the word useful. Now, Paul was using some contrasting language here, and he probably knew this because Onesimus' name means useful. That's what his name translates to. So he's using a play on words to make his point to his friend. Have you ever felt useless before? I know I have. I don't know, maybe you're in a situation where you just feel like, this may be out of your hands, something's happened. You're sort of standing there going, I wish I could fix this, but I can't. I wish I could help in some way, but I'm just sort of standing here awkwardly in the corner. And nobody likes feeling like that. It's not fun at all. We all like to feel useful. We all like to feel like we can jump in and help, and it makes us feel good. For example, maybe you started a brand new job and you want to impress the boss, you're helping out, you're like, I don't mind doing it, I can clean out the filing cabinet or whatever it is, you jump in and you be useful and it feels good and it feels like you're contributing to a greater good. At dinner table at a party, you want to clear the table, wash up, help your friends, somebody's car battery dies, all right, I've got some jumper leads, do you want me to get the jumper leads? Yeah, that'd be great, awesome. We like to help, we want to be useful. But clearly in this story, Onesimus, as we'll learn who he is, he wasn't living up to his name. He was called useful, but he's being useless. Interesting situation. Now, with our Bible reading, if we go to the next slide, please. Actually, the fourth slide, that would be amazing. Yep, so Paul is giving Philemon some information. First of all, he's actually giving him the location of his slave. It's not like sometimes you talk to parents who've got tracking devices on their kids' phones. Like, some of my kids at Kmart, interesting. This was 2,000 kilometres away from Colossae is where Rome was. And back then, obviously, no technology, so he would have gone, and then that would have been the end of it. So Paul's saying, hey, your slave is actually with me here in Rome. So I'm sure Philemon would have been like, really? Okay. That's really unexpected, okay? So he's finding out where his slave is. He's also hearing about that Onesimus has had a life-changing encounter with Jesus. So Onesimus is a Christian now, just like Philemon. He's asking Philemon a big ask. He wants him to accept him back, not as a slave, but as a brother. So things are starting to escalate. So he's finding out where he is. He's finding out he's a Christian. Now he's saying, mate, I really want you to accept him back as a brother in Christ. So he's asking him to extend forgiveness and mercy. Now, they have interesting connections with each other. So Paul, as I said, he was in Rome under house arrest. So he was basically working and ministering still. But he was under house guard. So he had a guard and he wasn't allowed to go too far. I'm not sure what the rules would have been, but he was basically being guarded by a soldier, but he was still writing letters, as we know, and doing stuff, working. Philemon was a convert of Paul's ministry in Colossae and had become his friend. He was a man of influence and power and wealth, so he had a bit of coin. Probably had the latest Land Cruiser parked in his driveway. So Onesimus, in contrast, had nothing. He essentially, culturally speaking, he was nothing. And because of what he'd done, he'd run for his life. So this story that we're going to get into is really about the amazing transformation of a lowly slave 2,000 years ago, like a real guy, real dude, heartbeat, and he's had this thing happen, and he's run away, and now the Apostle Paul is involved. So slavery in Bible times. So slavery, thankfully, we know nothing about slavery in Australia. It's not something we're aware of or see much of. But back in 60 AD, when this letter was written, it was just normal. It was like slavery was just, there's slaves. It was a normal part of the social kind of fabric, the social order. Wealthy people would have slaves working for them. It was just kind of what you did. Slaves were seen as possessions. They were kind of like, they belonged to their master. And if one of them ran away for whatever reason, they had every legal right to kill that slave. So basically, in the Roman Greek society, if a master had a runaway slave and they found him, it'd be like they could do whatever, basically. And that was seen as acceptable. But Christians of that day obviously had a different idea. And they were putting out ideas of saying, look, slaves are as valuable as anyone. Slaves are as valuable as free men, as the people that are running the place. They're no different. And so actually a lot of the issues that Christians had with being persecuted some of that was linked with this issue of Christians were saying kind of controversial stuff about slavery. It's like slaves were the same as others. Like, what? That doesn't make sense. It threatened the social order. It threatened the whole, people were getting nervous about what Christians were putting into slaves' minds. So yeah, interesting thought. We don't often realise that. Now I've got an illustration, $50 of Australians currency. I kind of worked out this would probably buy a couple of chicken palmies at the RSL. It will not quite fuel up my car, and I could probably buy a pair of shoes. That's the value of this bad boy. So, all right, if I fold this up, does it change in value? Can I still go down to the RSL? Yes. If I scrunch it up really violently, can I still go to the... I can still do it. All right, if I lie it on the ground, stand on it, I can still go to the RSL, thankfully. If I throw it up in the air and the wind catches it and it blows down to the street and someone brings it back to me and goes, there's your $50, I'm like, it's still the same value. And it's the same with how God sees us. No matter what we go through, no matter what condition we're in, even as bits hanging off of us, we're still valued by God the same way. And this is the message that Paul was teaching Philemon. Now, back to Onesimus. It's funny side note here. Some of these names in the Bible are kind of odd. And you just go, really? Philemon? I kept saying it wrong, and I'm like, filet mignon. And I nearly had a slide of that, but Donna said, don't do that. That will be weird. So if you forget how to say Philemon, it's similar to filet mignon. Anyway, Onesimus, I can't help you there. You're on your own. So Onesimus had done something. We know, but the Bible doesn't actually say what he did, but Bible scholars assume, and they think the most likely thing that happened is he probably stole something from Philemon. So he's stolen something, and he's run away. And he's run a long way. So like I said, 2,000 Ks. That's pretty much from here, Bribie Island, to Cooktown. So it's a long way. And so we think of the map of Bible, the maps in the back of the Bible, you go, oh, well, that's cute. But it's like a big area. It's a lot of, so they would have travelled over country, across oceans, and he would have done a lot of legwork to get to Rome. So he's run off to the Big Smoke. It's a hideout in the big city, and hopefully it'll all die down. The drama will stop. But God's got other plans, as he often does, and that's what this story is about. So as much as life as a slave would have been tough, they were looked after quite well, and often the reality is a master wants healthy slaves. He wants slaves that are strong and productive and happy and going to stay loyal to their master. So it's in their best interest to look after them. So they would have housed them and fed them and done everything they could. But still, it doesn't change the fact that it's wrong, obviously. But what I'm saying is the conditions they were in weren't always bad. And a lot of the people that weren't slaves were just trying to eke out some kind of living, subsistence farming. It would have been tough. So I'm sure there would have been slaves that probably were better off than people that weren't. So to steal from someone's master would have been a real insult. It would have been like, I'm looking after you, I'm providing for you. Yes, you work for me, but you've stolen from me. So it's like the saying, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. So it's like, this is kind of the context that we're dealing with. And this is why Onesimus was initially described as useless. He's like, oh, he's a useless slave. He's stolen from me. Now he's run away. He's just causing me trouble. I've got headaches. Now I've got to find a new slave. And so he's being marked as that. And he would have brought a lot of dishonour to the household. Oh, did you hear about Philemon's slave? He stole something or other. Oh, really? That's terrible. This is a negative. Now, so Onesimus is in Rome. He's in there, and God's obviously orchestrating all of this. But he meets Paul. They have a conversation. Paul leads him to Christ. He becomes a Christian. And then the topic comes up. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Colossae. Oh, do you know Philemon? Yeah, I do, actually. And it's come up. And Paul's talking to him. I'm just making this up. This is my imagination here. But you can imagine them talking here and saying, all right, well, maybe we should... God said, Paul, I want you to write a letter. He writes a letter. Now, in verse 11, Paul's stating that he's stating to his old master, he's no longer useless. In fact, he's useful for me and he can be useful for you. So Bible scholars also say that Onesimus probably became a messenger for Paul. So he's in Rome, he's helping out, he's learning from him, and Paul's giving him jobs. He's saying, oh, can you take this to this person? And he would have been like the ancient email servers back then. So he's delivering messages all over Rome and maybe further afield. He's proved he can do it. I mean, he's travelled 2,000 Ks to get there. So he's obviously got the legwork. He's strong and he can handle himself. But, you know, God's got a divine plan, and he knew Philemon. You know, he led him to Christ in Colossae. So it's all kind of starting to kind of come in together. Now, why is Paul getting involved? So Paul is acting like an advocate here. He doesn't want to pull rank, like we saw in the verse. He goes, I could pull rank, but I'm not going to. I want to tackle this slightly awkward situation from the perspective of your friend in Christ. And Paul's risking a bit too. So he risks losing his friendship. He risks blowing Onesimus' cover. I mean, Onesimus is essentially hiding out, and Paul's saying he's here. Come and find him. So he's risking making the whole situation worse. But he's actually used wisdom. And as you can read in the letter, he's putting it together, and God's inspiring him with what to say. And he opens the door for this amazing transformation in Onesimus' life. So if you look at verse 18, Paul's actually saying, look, if he's done anything that's caused you any loss, charge it to me. I'll pay for it. I was thinking about that. Imagine if you knew someone that was a learner driver, all right? And maybe, let's say, hypothetically, they'd crashed into a Mercedes-Benz or something, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. No insurance. They've smashed into this, I don't know, let's say SLS Black AMG, something really expensive. All right, and you go, how are they going to fix that? Oh my gosh! And they're in a situation, but the Mercedes is owned by a businessman. He's got loads of money, so it's like he'll be fine. You know, I'm sure they'll be fine. But for you to step into that situation and say, contact the businessman. Look, I know this young person. Look, whatever the cost is for your car, let me know and I'll pay for it. I'll cover the cost. That seems crazy. Why? Who would do that? Like, it doesn't make sense. But this is what Paul's doing. He's saying, this guy's caused you a loss. This guy's made the mistake. He's intentionally stolen something. I'll cover the cost. So even though that seems like a crazy situation, that's what's happening here. So I'm going to look at some parallels now. So if we go to the next slide, please, Hannah. It's always funny when you get to say something and the person on the data goes, oh, crap. It's a little bit of a scary job sometimes, a bit of pressure. So there's some parallels here. So Paul, without Paul, Onesimus would have remained a slave. If he hadn't actually stepped in, he would have just been hanging around in Rome. Nothing would have changed. He would have been in hiding. I mean, the slaves often were branded, so he would have always been seen as a slave. You're a slave, you're a slave. But Paul's gone, no. Without Jesus, we are slaves to sin. Philemon was a good man. Yes, he had slaves, and we don't necessarily agree with that, but he cared for his household. He looked after the church in Colossae. God is our master, and he provides for our needs. And then, just as Paul is an advocate for Onesimus, Jesus says in Romans 8, he intercedes on our behalf. So there's an interesting thing, like where you just go, I feel like I've heard this story before. You know, there's themes that come through with this story that just remind us of what God's doing. Verse 15 is the word forever, where it says, it seems you lost Onesimus for a little while so that you could have him back forever. It's cool. What a cool picture. It's saying, Onesimus has gone on this little wilderness journey. You've lost him as a slave, but he's come back to you better. He's come back to you, but he's come back to you as a son. He's come back to you as family, and he's going to be with you forever. That connection. It's the same old story. It's the same in the Bible. You know, humans, we rebel. We rebel against God, and then we go and do our own thing, and it's just reeling us back in. Sneak behind a tree. God saw everything. God saw Onesimus running over the countryside, probably stressed out of his brain. Like, I'm trying to picture this dude running. I think this is the way to Rome. Like, it would have been stressful. This guy wants to kill me. He could kill me, you know. And he's out there, and God's watching. He's seeing everything. It's amazing. So Onesimus tried to hide in Rome, but God saw the whole thing. God worked his purposes into Onesimus' story and used the Apostle Paul to make it happen. He was once a slave, and his master called him useless, and he became his son, and he was called useful. John 8:34-35 says, Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave of sin. A slave is not a permanent member of the family, but a son is a part of the family forever. So for me, I think this story of Onesimus is a story of healing. Isn't that something we all want, you know? Healed relationships, healed bodies, healed lives. Well, I think God starts with our spiritual hearts. And so that's the next part that we're going to look at, is a spiritual heart. So I think, God works from the inside out. He starts with us, and then it goes out, and then people can go, oh, wow, look what's happened in your life. And my wife's got this really cool mantra that we always talk about in our house, and it applies to this, and I want to share it with you. She says, where you put your time, your energy, and your money shows where your heart is. And I just love it. And we use it like constantly, because it's just like a little litmus test. It's like an assessment of where you're at. Where's your heart at? What decisions are you making? And is that where you want to be right now? So thinking about Onesimus, right? He's a slave. His mindset and his attitude was just on himself. And he's gone, I need to steal this to get money from me. And so he's stolen it. And it's led to a devastating break in trust. It's led to the fact he had to run for his life. But God's still there, and he's watching, and he knows, he's gracious, and he's watching, and he's just doing his thing to heal Onesimus' heart. And as he goes through that process, that spiritual 2,000 kilometres, it wasn't just physical, it would have been pretty spiritual, and God's working in his heart. And he surrendered his life to Jesus when he meets Paul, and he begins supporting his ministry and then being reconciled with his master. So this is really showing us God. It's showing us who he is. He's showing us, it's almost like he's the fourth character. So we've got the three guys, and God's the fourth character. He's watching, and he's in part of every single part of this story. So what about us? Where is our heart at? What are the plans that you have, that God has for your lives, and what are the plans that God has for my lives that maybe we're avoiding? What are the things that, the purpose that God has in store for us that maybe we're just not listening to him about? We're just like, not right now, God. What are the barriers that are perhaps stopping us from living a life to the fullness of what God intended? Maybe it's fear. Fear's a big one. Doubt. I struggle with doubt all the time. Little thought goes, you can't do that. That'll be silly. Pride, selfishness, hard-heartedness. When life kind of keeps throwing lemons at you, you start going, no, I'll do it on my own. I'll just push through. Unfortunately, it just means we're missing what God's got from plan for us. So here's some tips, practical tips of how we can allow God in. So 5 steps. First step is ask God to speak to us about where we're at now. It's a bit like that litmus test thing before. It's like, all right, God, where are we at now? Like when you take the car to the mechanic and say, look, where are we at with this car, Mr. Mechanic Man? And he goes, all right, your CV boot is busted, but you can probably do another 100 Ks on that, and this one needs to be done. Your battery's all right, but your tyres need replaced in the next service. So it's like a bit of an update on where you're at. We can ask God to do that too. God, where are we at? What are some of the things that we need to do? Second step is listen. We'll listen to him. Third step, obey. So he might say, look, I want you to surrender this. I want you to reconcile with this person. He might say, I want you to spend a bit less time doing that and more time doing this. He's going to speak to us. He's more than capable of getting our attention. Fourth step is allowing godly people that we trust to give us counsel, challenge, and encourage us. So sometimes we need people to go, great job, that was awesome. Sometimes we need someone to say, hey, dude, I feel like you kind of missed the point. We need that guidance, but people that we know are saying it from a loving place. And the fifth step is step out into what you believe God wants you to do. So God's always moving. He's always moving us. He's not a static God. He's an active God. He always wants us to go, okay, let's grow, let's move. He's always working. He's always moving. So I wanted to finish with a little bit of a testimony that links in with this too. So I guess for me, this story really hits me personally because I feel like it's kind of me. I feel like Onesimus. I feel like when I was 18, I was a bit lost. I was a bit of a lost kind of dude wandering around, living in Townsville. My big things were really anxiety and insecurities. That was my thing. That was my stuff. I felt very useless. That feeling of useless, oh my gosh, I could definitely relate to that. I was both fearful of God, but also angry at him. I was like, I know you're there, but I don't like this. I don't like what you're doing to me. At the time, our pastor in Townsville gave me a picture. He said, we've been water skiing during the day with people from church, which was a lot of fun. But we're sitting in his car, and he said, Mike, I got this picture of you. It's like you're like a dog on a big running line, and you're running back and forth, back and forth. And he said, you're just running and straining away from God. And every time God's trying to reel you in, you keep just arcing away. And he said, that's the picture I got. And he said, I don't know if it makes sense. And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. But over that period of time, of a couple of years, he started to reel me in and bringing people into my path. And one of the things that was a bit of an experience that made it was a foundational thing for me was I joined YWAM. And I did a DTS course for 6 months. And it was a really hard 6 months, like really challenging, but the best thing I ever did. And it really helped me get to the core of who God was, who I am, and where I'm going. And since then, life has just been, it's been an amazing adventure. And I want to say there was still pain, there's still challenges and hiccups, but now I do it as a son, not a slave. And I think that's the big difference. Yeah, life is still messy sometimes and stuff goes wrong. But I really do believe that God is my Father in heaven. And that is a big deal. And today, it's a little bit poetic because we have Andrew and Faith Dutton here. They're visiting today because Andrew's coming next weekend to run our music tech retreat on Saturday, which is really cool. So Andrew's coming just to visit and hang out, and his wife Faith is here too. But they were my YWAM leaders back in 1999. So it's a little bit like, it's really cool because this was actually planned before I knew you were coming today. But this message as well was preached at Paluma Dam. Well, not this message, but this passage was preached at Paluma Dam on a DTS. And it was a really powerful message for me then. And it's just really lovely that you're sitting here. So yeah, these two people were part of, I guess, the group of people that God brought around me to speak into my life. And it's just feel a little emotional. I don't want to get like that, but yeah, it's amazing. And I guess this is the thing. God is real and he's passionate about relationship. He's passionate about healing people. And honestly, I honestly thought I was just really useless. And God has been giving me opportunities to step into things and be useful for him. And it's been really beautiful. And I'm grateful for God. I'm going to give a few little tiny things. One was, and this was the start. I feel like it's hard to get started. Like, when you push a car, has anyone pushed a car before when it's not running, obviously? It's hard. But the hardest part is the first bit. Once you get the wheels moving, it generally starts to chug along and you're like, yes, I'm the strongest man alive, but the first bit is hard and you're really straining to get it moving and eventually the wheels start to move and you start moving it. And it's like, for me, I was asked to help with a thing called Gospel of Stedford, which is this big kind of like Christian music festival in Townsville. It had never been done before and it was amazing. There was like hundreds of acts from all around North Queensland and I was just helping. And my job was just to help this lady that was running it. And that gave me a sense of, I can do something. I'm helping. I'm putting things in labels and printing things. And it was just little things. But for me, it was massive. It just helped me go, I'm not useless. I'm helping. And then the next step was, I think it was actually Andrew, this as well, mate. You rang me up and said, YWAM Newcastle needs a bass player. And He rang me up and I got to play bass guitar for this band in Newcastle for 12 months. It was awesome. So again, I felt like God was saying, I want you to feel useful. So yeah, there's a little insight into my life, but it was little practical things that God allowed me to do that made the change in me. And yeah, that's what I thought I'd leave it there. So thank you guys for your part in my life. My wife has been someone else that, we've been married 23 years. She's an amazing, godly woman, and God's used her massively in my life because, when you're married, you know each other better than anyone. And yeah, so it's amazing how God does that through our spouses as well. So I want us to pray, and then we're going to head over to Ray, and make this time when we go into the back room for coffee and whatnot, find someone to talk to if you want to. If you want to pray with someone, sing out, talk to Ray or me or any of the leaders. We'd love to pray with you. This stuff is, this is a guy 2,000 years ago, a real man. People were calling him useless, but it's a beautiful story came out. So look, God, we want to pray right now. Thank you for who you are, Lord. Thank you that despite our mess-ups, that you know what you're doing. I pray right now that everyone that's here, that if you're speaking to them right now, I pray that they would listen and respond. And whether it's having a conversation with someone, whether it's writing something down, whatever it is, I pray that they wouldn't freeze up. I pray that they would step out and do something, whether it's a phone call or praying with someone. Lord, you're an amazing miracle-working God, and we want to just pray that you would continue to work in our lives. We want to honour you. We thank you that you're a healing God. Thank you for the story of Onesimus. And I pray that you'll bless everyone that's here and just continue to speak to us, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.